The Denver Broncos opened the preseason with a victory over the Dallas Cowboys 17-7, but they lose a key starter in the very beginning of the game on defense. What's the latest on Jonas Griffith? You get that and much more on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome into a brand new episode of Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos country for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day, every single day on your favorite audio podcasting platform, or whether you watch us on YouTube, do us a favor, hit that subscribe or that follow button if you have not done so already, so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, coverage, and more, including post-game recap. Sarah, my friend, tell you what, the Broncos kicking things off here once again against the Dallas Cowboys, a trend that seems to be evergreen. They just always seem to be beating the Dallas Cowboys. They open up the preseason with a 17-7 victory at home. A lot of storylines to talk about, quarterback competition, wide receiver competition, a lot of guys standing out. But more importantly, we're also going to talk about the Broncos losing a key defensive player for 4 to 6 weeks. Brutal injury to start things off for the season. But hey, you know what? Broncos victory, we'll break down everything else.
That's right. A Broncos victory always feels good, no matter if it's preseason or regular season. Obviously, they're different, but I think in the preseason, there's so much to take away. Like we've been talking about just in the weeks leading up to this. Like we're ready to see all these individual players that we've been hearing about at OTAs, at training camp. We're ready to see these guys go out there and get an opportunity in a game. And really for the Broncos to go out and beat the Dallas Cowboys 17-7. The Cowboys didn't even score till there was less than 5 minutes left in the game. So really just an all-around great performance and reminiscent of the regular season game last year, if I may, Cody, where the Cowboys didn't score until 55 or 56 minutes into that regular season game. So definitely the Denver Broncos had a kind of a fun day on both sides of the ball in terms of the guys that played. A little bit of negative that comes along with preseason sometimes, unfortunately, the injury side of things, and we'll talk about that. But I think for the fans that are wondering, I mean, man, the Tim Patrick injury and the fallout from that, we've been talking all this time about who at wide receiver is going to step up. Now, I think after this first preseason game, we're kind of going to be wondering, like, how many wide receivers can the Broncos actually keep? Because there's so many that stepped up.
I wrote it in my post-game column at Mile High Sports. George Paton is going to have to make some very tough decisions when it comes to the wide receiver depth on this team, and it's because of the guys that we're going to highlight here. We're going to highlight Kendall Hinton, Brandon Johnson, who we've been hyping up on the show, Seth Williams, and even Jalen Virgil, some undrafted guys here. We already know what the Broncos wide receiver core is going to look like for the most part. Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, Montreal Washington, those guys are the guaranteed four. There were some breakout performances. Let's talk about Seth Williams. Now, for him, he didn't have the total amount of yardage, but he had the body traits, right? The size, the catch radius that we've been talking about that's reminiscent of a little bit of Tim Patrick. He had a touchdown grab as a 1-yard touchdown pass on a corner route, and he just elevated up to get it. He finished the night with 4 catches, 29 yards, and 1 touchdown. But let's get to Kendall Hinton, number 9, the Hall of Fame quarterback for this Broncos football team. He had some incredible catches there. Now, he started off with a couple of short to intermediate crossing patterns, but then he had a massive touchdown down the left sideline, a beautiful throw by Josh Johnson, leading him in stride, catching it over the top of a defender for a 24-yard touchdown. He finished the night with 3 catches for 53 yards and 1 touchdown. It was an unbelievable play. And look, he just high-pointed it. He just went over Cowboys defenders to make a play and didn't allow the DB to try to make a play on the football. That's one thing I think the aggressive nature and how we saw Kendall Hinton do that, it stood out to me because I don't think we saw that last year, sir. I didn't think we saw the element from him where he's just rising up to go get the football the way that he did. That was a very promising sign tonight. And then there were a couple other guys that impressed as well.
There were. I mean, Kendall Hinton, his touchdown catch was awesome. But I mean, Brandon Johnson, like you mentioned, not to be outdone, had a really nice play early on in this game, had a couple of really clutch catches as well on a couple of drives that Josh Johnson engineered. A 3rd down reception that he had was in particular pretty impressive. He kind of came inside of Kelvin Joseph and really just sat down right at the, the first down marker and made a big play, a tough catch in contested coverage. So, man, these guys are all out there showing out. Brandon Johnson, obviously, he's one of those guys that I think he's kind of drawn the favor of the coaching staff of Russell Wilson. So he's really somebody I think to watch. And he was out there not just making, he wasn't just wide open or anything. And not to say that any of these guys were just wide open out there making these catches, but I think a lot of times in the preseason, that's exactly what happens. You get a guy that's just running free on a busted coverage or something, but these guys are making contested catches in clutch situations. Like Kendall Hinton had the one on the 2-minute drill to really set up the Broncos in good position for that field goal there before halftime. So, and Brandon Johnson wasn't alone at the receiver position. You mentioned it. I mean, obviously you had Kendall Hinton, Brandon Johnson, and then Jalen Virgil, another undrafted rookie coming out there making some big plays. And I think that he really stood out at the end of the game. He didn't get much chance to do anything in the first half, but in the second half, he was kind of the star of the show.
And it all started with the Broncos being backed up on their own 1-yard line after a great punt by the Cowboys, probably the best play they had all night, to be honest with you. And then Brett Rippon just unloads it to Jalen Virgil, 42 yards. He catches it, gets hit with contact. Russell Wilson comes onto the field and celebrates. Like, that is a huge moment for Virgil. And I just couldn't help at that moment. I thought to myself, all right, hey, this is where George Payton's going to have some really tough decision making. Are they going to carry 6? Are they going to carry 7 receivers on the roster? Who can they maybe try to risk getting on the practice squad? But you know what? The Dallas Cowboys are probably going to be paying attention, very close attention to the waiver wires over the next couple of weeks of the NFL preseason and seeing if the Broncos let one of these guys go and if they put a claim in. I would not be surprised, but I don't feel like you can let Jalen Virgil go in a sense, because I feel like if you cut or release Jalen Virgil and you hope to bring him back, a team like the Cowboys will say, hey, this guy impacted us. He's got that deep ball speed. We don't have that necessarily outside of CeeDee Lamb. Let's snag this guy and watch him go on to have NFL stardom. That would just be the Broncos' luck if they tried to bank that out there. But outside of that, there's the receiver competition. Even the backup quarterback competition was something that comes under a little bit of focus here. Josh Johnson, the first 3 drives, the Broncos offense, it kind of looked really rough. I mean, there was negative yardage on the first drive. They only had 39 total yards on several plays and Josh Johnson's first 3 drives. But then his next 3 drives were promising: touchdown pass, and then, as you mentioned, a pass to Kendall Hinton to set up a Brandon McManus 57-yard field goal, which he initially missed, but there was an offsides penalty. He moved it up 5 yards, 52-yard field goal attempt. It is good. Broncos going to halftime with a 17-0 lead, and that was really the control of the game for this Broncos team. But Broncos country coming up here in just a moment. Sarah and I, we're going to highlight a key injury to the Broncos defense. One starter who got some run in the preseason opener went out with an injury and is expected to miss some time with a little bit of a significant injury. What is the status on Jonas Griffith, and who can step up when he misses this time as well? We get to that coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about our friends over there at BetterHelp. Life is full of twists and turns, and it's important to show up for yourself through it all. And BetterHelp Online Therapy will assess your needs and can match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than 48 hours. For me personally, the last couple of weeks, I've been using BetterHelp, and I've noticed the benefits of talking to somebody outside of my circle to try to get some guidance on some of the life's tougher decisions that I have to make in my day-to-day. And you should utilize BetterHelp as well if you need somebody to talk to. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. And you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions so you don't have to be on camera if you don't want to. And getting therapy every week is as easy as a few clicks on your laptop or your phone. I personally love the features where my therapist will call me on the scheduled time that I set, and we get to talk about some things. And there's action-based worksheets that your therapist works with you personally, action items to help you find the solutions in your life that you need. And they have a very special offer for my listeners. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's 10% off your first month of online therapy at betterhelp.com/lockedon. There was a lot of excitement about the Denver Broncos defense in the preseason opener against the Dallas Cowboys, but an injury quickly deflated the air out of the balloons of Broncos country. Thank you so much, Broncos country, for tuning in and making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day. Every single day we have you covered, every day with practice reports, recaps, game recaps, and more. But Sarah, my friend, really kind of a big blow initially on really the second play of the game defensively for this Denver Broncos team. They were on defense first. Cowboys won the toss. First play, you see Baron Browning do just such a fantastic job setting the edge with that quick speed and the ability to use his arm, squeeze things downhill line. But then the next play, there's a 4-yard run by the Dallas Cowboys, and all of a sudden the camera pans to Jonas Griffith, who was down on the play, and he was in a lot of pain. The cameras on the broadcast, they caught him, and he suffered a dislocated elbow that's going to hold him out of action 4 to 6 weeks, according to our good friend Mike Kliss. But this kind of felt like, Sarah, for a moment, I was there when the Tim Patrick injury happened. And when everybody in the media room in the press box saw Jonas Griffith go down, we all thought to ourselves, oh no, this isn't good, because he's a starter on defense, but then you lack experience in terms of starter depth behind him. So now that begs the question, what do the Broncos do with Jonas Griffith's injury?
It's tough because like I've said before, I mean, they really put their eggs in the Jonas Griffith basket this offseason. I know they have Alex Singleton, who actually did a really nice job. He wasn't the one that was coming in for Jonas Griffith, but he did a nice job in addition to Justin Strnad, who did come in for Jonas Griffith in this game. But man, it's tough to know. I mean, with Justin Strnad playing as well as he did in this game, and how well you've mentioned that he performed at training camp as well, you kind of think the Broncos maybe have some guys that can hold down the fort, but I think you got to go out and get somebody. Your other depth at the inside linebacker position is Barrington Wade and Kanai Mauga. And so I think that's something that I think the Broncos are going to have to address, because you're not putting Baron Browning back at inside linebacker. I think it's clear the Broncos like him there. He likes being there, and he's really good at it. So I think the Broncos have to stay the course with Baron Browning. And because of that, you may have to go out and add a couple of bodies at linebacker and see if anybody can kind of put up a competition with the guys that have been around all offseason. That's the really tough part right now, is that you're kind of backed into the corner of having to go get somebody with experience starting in the NFL that can pick up your terminology rather quickly, somebody that could come in and play right away, because you can't really afford well, this guy's going to come in and we're going to take a look at him at practice at this point. That's not really going to work right now. You got to have somebody that your pro scouting department has looked at and said, hey, this guy could be a fit. I know the Broncos brought in a free agent linebacker a couple weeks ago, and that could be a possibility. Alexander Johnson, who's been with the team, is still out there. Don't know if that's a possibility, but certainly you got to bring somebody in, because Jonas Griffith, he was a key starter. Like you mentioned before, it wasn't even particularly close in the competition between he and Alex Singleton for the starting job next to Josie Jewell. So, there's options out there, and the Broncos are lucky that there are options out there, but you got to make a move, I think, at some point here in the very near future.
And that veteran guy that you mentioned who that they hosted for a visit was Joe Schobert. I mean, a guy who's got some vast experience, former Pro Bowl linebacker. You have to assess your needs. How do you view maybe his fit? Is he a guy that you would start alongside Josie Jewell? But you make a great point. The Broncos are literally one more injury away at anybody at the linebacker position from being in dire straits, kind of being back to a similar situation that they were last year. And they had to go through a multitude of different guys. Now, after the game, we were able to go in the locker room. I was able to talk with Justin Strnad a little bit, had a great game for the Broncos against the Dallas Cowboys. And I encourage Broncos fans to go back and rewatch the game. Keep an eye on number 40. I thought he did a really good job tracking, taking angles. And I felt like, honestly, he and Alex Singleton together on the field, I feel like they did a really good job. So, I'm not necessarily worried about the reserves for the Broncos in terms of linebacker. I think they're both in great position. But Strnad just told me that playing alongside a guy like Alex Singleton is beneficial because he knows defenses really well. These guys walk out on the field every single day of practice together with Josie Jewell. But even more so, Justin Strnad said that he just feels great. He's smart. He's picked up the playbook. He's having more fun. He described that he's having more fun playing football right now than he was last year. And I think that's a very promising sign for him, playing a key role on special teams as well. But, you are right. Denver may have to look at bringing in somebody, whether it be for a few weeks. I mean, how does it factor in when you do have this injury to Griffith, who is anticipated? Hopefully he'll be back by the San Francisco 49ers Week 3 game on Sunday Night Football. If not, you could be looking at Week 4 or Week 5 of the regular season. But I think the good news, the silver lining, is that Jonas Griffith will be back at some point for this Broncos defense. And I think that is something that needs to be highlighted. It doesn't get spoken about enough. But obviously, just a blow. And it goes back to this whole conversation. How much do you want to play your starters in the preseason? I know Broncos fans wanted to see Russell Wilson in the preseason opener, but we saw what happened to Zach Wilson, by the way. The he had the knee dislocation, the hyperextension, the meniscus tear, and the bone bruise that comes with that. I mean, they dodged a bullet for him not having a serious injury that would have taken him out the entire season. Just in my opinion, it's not worth playing your starters. And there was one guy, Sarah, who is technically, in our opinion, I think starter quality that played the entire game. And we'll talk about him and some other news and notes from the Broncos 17-7 preseason victory against the Dallas Cowboys Empire Field at Mile High. But before we do that, let me tell you about BetOnline.net, the sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos post-game report. And BetOnline.net is the fastest and the easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. You can find all your favorite sports and events at the number one online source for odds, lines, and games. You can find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. And BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. So head to betonline.net today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. Highlighted in the Denver Broncos 17-7 victory over the Dallas Cowboys, some defensive standouts and some key observations from Nathaniel Hackett in his first game as the Broncos head coach. Thank you so much for tuning in and making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. Broncos country, we appreciate you so much for taking time to listen or to watch us break down all things Denver Broncos objectively in one place. You get that here, the Locked On Broncos podcast. Sarah, my friend, it's so hard to compile some of the major takeaways, every major takeaway from a game into a post-game report in the time manner that we do. But you know what? Let's highlight some of the defensive standouts, and then we'll close out with some notes here on Nathaniel Hackett. Baron Browning looked like the best player on the field for the Broncos. I mean, honestly, he looked like the best player on the field on Saturday in general, in combination of both teams. And it was a little surprising. He played all four quarters, which after the Jonas Griffith injury, a lot of us, we were sitting there like, okay, hey, Baron has looked great. All right, now let him enjoy the game by watching it on the sideline.
Right. I think everybody was on edge at that point. After Jonas Griffith went down, everybody's like, all right, let's get Baron Browning off. And then he'd make another great play. And it's like, all right, we love the great play, but let's get him off the field now. And then when he came out and was on special teams right to start the second half, and then he kind of, grabbed at his leg after coming into contact with a Cowboys player, I think then everybody was like, all right, like Hackett, we've really enjoyed you up to this point, but man, get Baron Browning off the field. He's getting a little Von Miller type of treatment there from the fan base, and rightfully so. I mean, understandable. Last year and in recent years, the edge rush for the Broncos hasn't been great, and Baron Browning looks like he's going to be a real asset there. The play where he knifed through the offensive line and just swatted the ball down like he was blocking a toddler playing basketball, like a pickup game of basketball. It's kind of what it looked like out there. And he's just that fast, right? He can play that fast. And he had that speed to power rush where he got the sack on the Cowboys backup quarterback. And right before that 2-minute drill happened. So really his big play defensively helped set up that 2-minute drill for the Denver Broncos offense. Is just great to see. I mean, Baron Browning is a beast out there. I know you've got to see him up close. You got to see the speed. We all got to see it tonight on the field. Man, he is fantastic, and he just looks fast, and he looks comfortable out there. I know he talked after the game about like, I wanted to, I'm glad to play all four quarters. I need the reps and this and that, and I think that's great for him to have that perspective. But at the same time, like, let's acknowledge what we all saw out there. We don't need to see 4 quarters in a preseason game of Baron Browning when we need him for 4 quarters against the Seattle Seahawks here in a couple weeks.
Well, and there's guys like Aaron Patrick, Jonathan Kongbo, who stepped up. Kongbo had half a sack alongside Matt Henningsen. I thought he had an impressive evening. And Ioma Uwazurike, got a chance to talk with him after the game inside the locker room. He said, for him, he's still learning the playbook. He's still learning his position. And he says, it felt really good to get out there. But I got to shout out to 2 rookies there. I thought they did a really good job. They had moments of getting through the backfield, causing penetration, causing pressure, causing throws to be rushed a little bit. And that's something that you want to see. I even think Henningsen had a learning lesson too, because he went up to go get a quarterback one time. Quarterback slipped underneath. But then the second time he's like, you know what? I'm not going to jump up anymore. I'm just going to wrap this guy up. And he and Kongbo came away with a sack on the play there, half sack combined. But let's talk about PJ Locke. I mean, PJ Locke on the second defensive possession of the game, I thought did a really good job. I thought that unit had some spring to him. You had Damari Mathis at corner. You had Michael Ojemudia at corner. You had Caden Stearns and PJ Locke at the safety position. But there was a 4th and 2 situation on the Broncos 38-yard line where there was pressure by Matt Henningsen, who came through. Baron Browning, Nick Bonito. These guys were just causing havoc. but PJ Locke read an out route, a kind of a play to the sticks perfectly, jumped it, intercepted it on 4th and 2 to give the Broncos possession. I talked to PJ after the game, and he said, I saw them run that play a couple of times in the scrimmage that we had against them on Thursday. So for him, film study tendencies, things that they did last year, he kind of picked up on that a little bit. But hey, man, it was nice to see him play as well as he did. Michael Ojemudia had almost had an interception. He almost housed it, but he said next week he's looking forward to trying to get his hands on the football.
We got to get that guy an interception, man. He's the almost interception king. Ojemudia, we're rooting for you. Come on, man. You got this. PJ Locke, I mean, he couldn't have been in better position. If he was the receiver for Dallas, he wouldn't have been in better position on that play. It was a great play just to watch. I mean, you miss Matt Henningsen if you're focused on the interception of the play. Matt Henningsen gets a great pressure, but then PJ Locke did such a great job. He passed his guy off, his initial guy, to Justin Strnad, and then he just broke on that out route before he, like you said, he knew that play and what they were running, and he knew exactly what was going to happen. The rushed throw from, I believe the quarterback's name is Cooper Rush. So the rushed throw from Cooper Rush, it worked out in PJ Locke's favor. So, and the great thing is, and the note that you brought up that I tweeted about, I think it's worth mentioning that he mentioned to you at Texas, he played pretty much strictly in the nickel and not safety. This interception came with him playing in that nickel position, that slot corner alignment. So I think that was really cool to see, just a little bit of, stuff that we've been talking about over the offseason and things that players can do that, man, I didn't even know he could do. He went out there and he executed in that way. I think that versatility and having guys like defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero, who's been a safeties coach and defensive backs guy, Christian Parker, obviously very good, and Ola Adams back there coaching up the secondary as well. I think the Broncos have just such a great group of player developers on this coaching staff, and they're getting these guys in positions to highlight their skill set. We talked a lot about how Caden Stearns could have been that guy or could still be that guy, but I think you're starting to see, like, these guys are going to move around the formation quite a bit. We're going to see them playing a versatile role. PJ Locke, he can go up there and play a little nickel corner for the Broncos if they need. And I think definitely seeing him make that play certainly validates his versatility for that secondary to make an impact this season.
I want to highlight some of the other safeties as well. J.R. Reed, I thought, had a really fantastic game. I like some of the plays that we saw, including a really good pass breakup where he just absolutely smashed a wide receiver that was playing inside the slot. And then Jamar Johnson, I want to see a little bit more from Jamar Johnson. He had a perfect opportunity, Sarah, on the evening to intercept a pass, but instead of going and attacking the football, he kind of waited for it to get to him. It hit him right here in kind of the hands and the chest, and then he got hit by a Cowboys guy, dropped the ball. I mean, it's just like those opportunities where you miss being able to take the football away. I feel like at the end of the day, when you have other safeties that are playing well, it hurts you. And I think that hurt Jamar Johnson in this game. And then Delarian Turner-Yell. I mean, we've seen him have some highs and lows through training camp. He leaves the game and goes into concussion protocol. And, unfortunately, that's something that's out of the Broncos' hand. The independent contractors and consultants, they look at the cameras, they see something. He got a little banged up on a tackle. They pulled him out. He did not return to the game. It's just stuff like that. The safety position, I mean, the Broncos may get away with just stashing Delarian on the practice squad this year. I got to see a little bit more from him overall. But I don't want to focus too much on the defense, too. There's a couple notes I want to mention on the offense. Nathaniel Hackett in a post game, he said he wasn't very happy with the rushing game. And the Broncos, honestly, they could not run the ball at all against the Cowboys. They had 22 total rushing attempts for 39 yards, not very efficient. Not sure if that's a combination of the new backs that were in town. Even Mike Boone couldn't really get anything going as a rusher, or whether it was the blocking. And so he's going to go back to that. He said that was unacceptable. They need to be able to run the ball. So I'm glad that he was open about that. But you know what we also saw? He went for it 3 times on 4th down in this game, really when they were in chip shot field goal range. So I asked him in the post-game press conference, whether that aggressiveness in terms of him going for it on 4th down is just where he's at in terms of his personality as a play caller, or whether it's just, something he wants to practice and participate in the preseason. He says it's a little bit of combination of both. He says, we want to be aggressive, but we also want to be smart. But you know what? Like in several situations, Sarah, if Russell Wilson's on the field, you think that he's coming off the field to kick a 26-yard field goal? I mean, if the Broncos have an opportunity, if it's 4th and short, Russ is going to be like, no, coach, we're on the field. And I guarantee you, Nathaniel Hackett will listen to him.
And I like him taking those risks, right? I think those are things that even we saw in last year's preseason from Vic Fangio that we were kind of like out of left field. That's kind of what it felt like. And I think now more and more you're seeing that aggressive mentality from NFL coaches to play those odds. Like if it's 4th and 2, 4th and 3, or even if it's 4th and 5. I mean, you have Russell Wilson as your quarterback, and you have the choice of maybe potentially getting 6 points, 7 points, or taking 3 points, especially with the way that the NFL is today and how quickly teams can score on you. You've got to be willing to take some of those risks. And so I love that. I love that you're putting your faith in your players. At the bare minimum, you're going out there, you're putting the faith in the players to say, I trust you to go out and make a play. And it wasn't just, quick hitting passes. It wasn't just like, we're going to try to catch you off guard with a screen or things like that. It was, I mean, they're cranking the ball downfield on these important downs and distances here. So I think definitely it was great to see that kind of risk from the head coach. And certainly you love to see the different things in terms of game management, calling the timeouts, and what he
Yes.
called in that post-game presser, really stealing a possession there. That's the mentality I think we've all been just going crazy every single
Has
weekend,
it
being
been?
like, why? Exactly. Where has it been? Where has this mentality been? Let's steal a possession. That's exactly what I did on Madden for my entire lifetime growing up. Steal the possessions, use the timeouts correctly, go out there and give your offense a chance. And then the great thing was when they finally did steal that possession, he didn't just sit on the ball. He wasn't just like, all right, we're just going to run it a couple times, see if we break off a big run. No, he's attacking the ball downfield with his backup quarterback and a bunch of wide receivers that nobody from the other team even knows. So I think that definitely I love to see the mentality from Nathaniel Hackett, and you love to see the trust that he's put in his players, because that particular scenario led to 3 points. And I think that gives you confidence going into the season. If we can do it in the preseason with our second and some of our third unit, we can definitely do this with our starters and our best players.
And that's the thing I always wondered too. I was like, what would it look like if the starters were on the field? But granted, Broncos country, I don't want to see anything happen to any of the starters. I don't want to see anything happen to any of the backup players. But the reality is, in the preseason, a lot of your backups going to play a ton. So I think I am on the boat of saying I can personally wait to see Russell Wilson play week 1 against the Seattle Seahawks. There's nothing that I think we need to see. Like, he looked good in the warmups, by the way. I was watching him throw warmups to Jerry Jeudy, Cortland, KJ Hamler. He looked pretty dang good. So you know what? That is satisfying enough for me. But Broncos country, the Broncos start off the preseason 1-0 with a 17-7 victory over the Dallas Cowboys. They're on the road next week against the Buffalo Bills. They get a run into former Bronco Von Miller. Malik Reed said he's looking forward to seeing that as well. I got a chance to chat with him in the locker room after the game, and it's going to be a little bit of a fun matchup, but that one is going to be on the road in Buffalo. Can the Broncos start the preseason 2-0? But more importantly, can they get the run game going? We're going to follow all the storylines and much more this week here on the Locked On Broncos podcast. Thank you once again for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. Sarah Benninger, myself, we have you covered the rest of the way.